Warhammer fans rejoice, for there has probably never been as good a time to be a fan of the franchise than there is right now. The lore is popping, the games are dropping, and every Games Workshop nerd's hero, Henry Cavill, is in the process of bringing a live-action series to Amazon Prime. Now, it's been a little while since the last video on this channel, and there have been some major developments in that time frame regarding the Games Workshop properties, but today we're going to talk about the most obvious drop that has taken not only the Warhammer fandom by storm, but the video game industry as a whole. That's right, perhaps the most anticipated 40k title ever produced, Shoota's Blood and Teeth. Okay, obviously I'm kidding around, but I definitely do recommend trying that one out if you haven't already. It's boss. Anyway, if this is your first time seeing a video on this channel, well then welcome to the Legion. I'm Ollie, and today we're diving into the ups and downs and lefts and rights of Games Workshop and Focus Entertainment's latest release. So at this point, Space Marine 2 has been out for a little bit over 4 months now, and maybe you're one of those players who waits a while after a game's release for a decent price drop, or maybe you want to wait for the hype to die down a bit before investing your own time and money into a new title. Or you're like me and you waited to get it for Christmas. Well, don't worry, because that's exactly what I did. So, without giving away too many spoilers, I can tell you everything you need to know if you're thinking of jumping into the Tyranid infested fray that makes up this game. The first thing to note is that this game takes place roughly 200 years after Space Marine 1, so let's sum up the ending to that game released back in 2011 before we dive any further into this one. So at the end of Space Marine 1, Captain Demetrian Titus of the Ultramarine 2nd Company, despite just having defeated the Chaos Lord Nimroth and preventing him from ascending into a demon prince, is taken into custody of the Inquisition after one of his Codex-loving subordinates accuses him of corruption due to his inexplicable resistance to warp energies. Now, in the 200 years between the games, Titus was kept for over a century in stasis by Inquisitor Jerome Thrax, only being taken out of stasis for periodic tests. After said Inquisitor, Thrax was eventually possessed by a demon himself though, and then slain by the Grey Knights, Titus was awoken and sent to the Death Watch, where he chose to stay for another century to serve as a Black Shield, feeling he'd somehow disgraced his beloved Ultramarines. Now let's jump ahead 13 years real time, and the series has finally made its glorious return to casual gamers and 40k lovers alike. And for an added bonus, the role of Titus has been taken over by Clive Standen, who is probably most well known from History Channel's hit series Vikings for his role as Rollo. Dang, say that 5 times fast. So, spoiler alert, this game opens up with a quick prologue with Titus still a part of the Death Watch before he is eventually brought home to the Ultramarines, where he undergoes the Calgarian rites to become a Primaris Space Marine. He also ends up being demoted to Lieutenant, as his former post is now occupied by Captain Sevastus Acheron, though after what he'd gone through for the past 200 years, this doesn't really bother him that much. So Space Marine 2's main campaign sees the players take control of Titus during the Fourth Tyranid War, which brings the series concurrent with the major events happening in the rest of the overall 40k franchise. So unlike the first game, in which characters were essentially written for the game outside of established canon, this game was written with current canon in mind and retroactively pulls the original game into canonical existence. Chaos Space Marines also make a return, though instead of a warband of unknown origin like the one created for the first game, the well-known traitor legion the Thousand Suns arrives on the scene to unleash hell on the Ultramarines and their Cadian allies. Now, the campaign takes roughly 10 to 12 hours over 6 main missions and the previously mentioned prologue in order to complete, which isn't bad and is a satisfying runtime for this well-put-together third-person shooter. However, where this game truly excels is in its online multiplayer features. Obviously, there's some fun options for some classic PvP on offer for players who just want to jump right into arena battles. However, there are also 8 missions with 5 difficulty settings for some player versus enemy combat, and what adds interest to these missions is that they tie directly to the main campaign and are not just random actions that have little to do with the story. Now, something that makes these missions even more fun is that the enemy spawn mechanic is dynamic, meaning you won't always get the same enemies in the same place, and sometimes you'll even end up in mini boss fights against enemies such as a Tyranid Carnifex or a Chaos Hellbrute. There's also a variety of scores you can go against with your squad, such as number of kills and amounts of ranged and melee damage dealt, in order to gain more XP. And don't forget to look for items throughout each mission, because some items such as gene seeds and data slates also boost XP. There's also 6 separate classes to choose from and level up with a generous amount of customization, so you can play as other Space Marine chapters or even your own chosen colors for your homebrew legion. You also have the ability to purchase new weapons in-game with points earned from completing missions and upgrading them with perks unlocked with experience and mastery points. Unfortunately, and as is the case with most video games out there are some drawbacks to this title, primarily with the customization and the DLC. If you're playing on console, you are definitely limited to emblems and decals in this game, as well as specific colors, and while there are a lot of both, there is no ability to create your own. And while that in its own isn't terrible, you are limited even more by the fact that you have to spend points to unlock them. You also can't just pick and choose what to unlock, as most emblems and colors are in tiers divided up by individual chapters. So if you want to unlock a decal that's 4th tier under a given chapter's heraldry, you have to spend points and unlock each item ahead of it. Unfortunately, this aspect also carries over to a lot of the DLC, as even after purchasing the cosmetic packs for actual money, you are only paying for the ability to unlock those items with points rather than purchasing them outright, which doesn't seem too bad if you have the points, but it seems to me that if you are paying more money for items to customize your Marines, you should get those items outright rather than having to slog through more missions or matches if you don't already have enough points. Now, there are some items you can use immediately without spending points, such as those in the McCragg's Chosen DLC, as well as the Dark Angels Champion Bulwark skin. However, you can't customize that one, nor can you use any armor pieces from the skin individually. There's also only one classic style Mark 8 helmet in the game, and unfortunately it's part of the Dark Angels cosmetic pack, which means you have to spend actual money in order to spend your virtual money to unlock it. It also has the Ravenwing chapter emblem in the middle of the forehead, which cannot be removed, and somehow the devs managed to make the helmet design look less than that of a towering, imposing, and intimidating superhuman to something more like an angry robot pig. Now, mostly these complaints are simple nitpicks, and the overall points and unlockable system does have its perks, as most of the better armor pieces are given as rewards after completing a given number of missions or matches in PvP, regardless of XP. However, it should be noted that class and weapon leveling does not cross over between PvE and PvP, so don't expect to be able to max out your bulwark against the Tyranids in PvE and then go slaughter some enemy players in PvP with the same stats. Also, unlike the campaign, you have to be online for any progress to save in PvP and PvE, and this includes solo trials and cosmetic changes, as well as unlocked perks. So, while there are indeed some drawbacks, when looking at the overall scope of this game and its impact on the Warhammer franchise, Space Marine 2 is still quite possibly the greatest 40k video game entry in the past 20 years. And while there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with me on that, hear me out. While other games such as the Space Hulk series and Battle Sector can be considered mechanically accurate depictions of the tabletop games that inspired them, and the Dawn of War trilogy were influential enough to even have the Blood Ravens chapter appear in other games, including in this series, none of those titles have generated as much interest in the Warhammer 40,000 universe as has been the case with Space Marine 2, let alone been as accessible to non-40k players and fans. With everything said, Space Marine 2 may not be a perfect game, but it certainly isn't a slouch. And the biggest drawback is probably its required internet connection if you want PvE data to save, even if you just want to run the mission solo with bots. Because of that, this channel rates the game with a solid 8 out of 10. So do not be afraid of it being a wasted investment unless you really just don't care for online gameplay. If that's the case, then it's probably best to wait for a flash sale to come along and get it at a significant discount. Okay, so this is the part where I solicit you guys for likes and subscriptions. So if you enjoyed this video, then follow the Emperor's will and give a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Unless you're a heretic. If that's the case,
smash it to pieces.
I'm also in the process of setting up a Twitch channel for future gaming streams, so be sure to hop on over and follow for when I start doing that. The link will be in the description box below. Thanks for watching, and as always, may the Emperor guide your hand.